Before I embraced the German wild countryside, I used to live in the most depressing, cloudiest, dirtiest, ugliest, stinkiest, simply the best city in the world, Berlin. You know you're in Berlin when you can hear people swear in more languages than your brain can process in one single subway ride. And if you've been to any major European city, you know that you get to meet people from all over the world. But more so in Berlin, the city which people from more than 180 nationalities consider their home. Forget about German. The more central you go, the more foreign languages you will hear. English, Australian, even Canadian. Very funny, I know. Seriously though, besides English you'll hear a lot of Turkish, various Arabic dialects, Hebrew, Russian, Polish, Mandarin, all the major languages really, and then some. And now, due to the magic of the geopolitical events, now you get a solid dose of Ukrainian too. Now, some people might argue Berlin isn't Germany, and they're not entirely wrong. I mean, where else can you stumble upon an abandoned factory turned into a techno club, and street artists turning a dumpster really into a piece of art? Not exactly what you imagine as a traditional German culture with Lederhosen and Sauerkraut, yeah? Not even talking about that one friend of yours who still associates Germany with World War II and Hitler. But to me, it also was all new when I moved to Germany almost 10 years ago. 9.5 to be exact. So what did I know about Germany before becoming a Berliner? Well, only the most important things. It's the land of the Autobahn, Kinder Surprise, and Michael Schumacher. Yes, I'm that old. And David Hasselhoff? No, he's the Knight Rider dude, not the superstar of the Berlin Wall. I'm sorry. Talking about the wall, before moving here, I also knew that Berlin once was divided by a communist wall, which wasn't exactly inspiring me to move here in the first place. Look how that turned out. Against all odds, I somehow survived the good 9 years in this wicked city. And now, as I'm about to bid farewell to Deutschland, I think it's time to share my ultimate guide to Germany with all its secrets. So let me share all the good, the bad, and whatever of living in Germany. Get yourself comfortable. It's gonna be a ride sprinkled with some personal anecdotes and some practical tips. So let's get started. The first few things I've grouped under the culture and community category. It's gonna be quite a few points here, but just to make it easier to navigate. Since we're already talking about Berlin, let's see how the community life of this Babylon is different from the rest of Germany. Well, what about it? First off, once you settle down a bit, probably one of the first things you will hear is something like, "Oh my god, it's so hard to find friends here." While there are enough people with the weirdest interests to find a match for you, what they actually mean is that it's kind of hard to make deeper connections for various reasons. A lot of people move to the city just to study, so they never planned to stay actually. A bunch of other people never invest time into learning language and culture. Some people don't even put themselves out there. Well, others try too hard, literally forcing themselves onto other people, which rarely ends well. It's always easier to make friends when you're younger. I personally set foot on German soil as a naive kid, heading into the 23rd year of life after landing at Berlin-Tegel Airport, which has even closed since. Still, I had to be willing to actively go out and look for my gang to hang out with at the local coffee shop, which, spoiler alert, never really happened. Who would have known that in the real world, people rarely hang out at coffee shops every day? I didn't put that much effort into it, quite frankly. And being more introverted, I don't feel the need to hang out with a lot of people. In fact, I kind of need a lot of time to recharge after all kinds of social gatherings. So instead, I prefer fewer but deeper connections. But here's the thing. Berliners, or maybe adults in general, have this peculiar way of having friends for specific activities only. The best way to find friends is to build a relationship around that activity you already enjoy doing, it seems. With time, it might grow into something more. Keyword being might. So don't be surprised if your relationship forever stays bound to that one activity. But yeah, that could be quite frustrating that you cannot spend time just hanging out outside of those activities, especially when responsibilities come in between, like family. Over the years, I managed to establish what I perceive as genuine friendship connections. But here comes a curveball.
That's good.
Another maybe somewhat unexpected thing that will make your friendships harder is distance. I would speak for the majority of Berliners here when I would say they love to stick to their neighborhoods. and never get out. So if your friend moves out to another neighborhood or district, say a 40-minute train ride or bicycle ride, it could feel literally like a cross-country adventure for some. So maybe what you need is an idyllic countryside camaraderie where everybody knows each other and you're passionately waiting for that one time in the month when Uncle Jerk brings out his accordion for the joy of the crowds.
And it's true. The smaller the community, the more connected people usually are. So if you get out to the countryside, it might be somewhat easier to stay social. People get together for celebrations, flea markets, help each other and gossip, organize daycare for kids and whatnot. And if you see where I'm going, well, the crowd is usually a bit more mature, read older.
And while Sunday shopping, in the American sense at least, doesn't really exist in cities even, you will soon discover that rural life offers even less variety. Restaurants, small kiosks, or Spätis as they call them in Berlin, are open, some of them even 24/7, but don't expect it from a small village somewhere in the middle of nowhere.
Here, some shops might be open just for a couple of hours on Saturdays, and even during the week they usually open later and close earlier, so like around 4 usually it's already closed.
In the place where I was staying, it didn't even have a supermarket or a pharmacy store. The shopping for clothes, just do it another day, man. So why is your favorite store selling shit you don't need anyway closed on Sunday, you might ask? Well, you might hear people throw around cultural, religious, historical reasons, but in the reality of the 21st century, it's a nod to the sacred German art of work-life balance. Imagine a day where even retail workers can kick back, relax, and indulge in a little bit of me time. It's a collective understanding that everyone deserves a breather, ensuring a fresh start in the work week. I remember one time I was moving apartments on Sunday and the paper box I was carrying opened from the bottom, sending all of its contents down the stairwell, somewhat dramatically reflecting where my life was going at the time. As I was collecting shattered plates and glass, a neighbor came out, not just to help, but he even brought me a bottle of cola. Nobody should be working on Sunday, he said. And it's probably one of the nicest things a stranger ever done to me, and it shows how kind people can be and how sacred Sundays truly are. Or maybe that guy was just really happy I was moving out finally. I don't know. In general, work-life balance is something worth mentioning because unlike in the US, where hustle is practically a national sport, here you actually get to live a little.
You don't live to work here. There's actually a minimum 20-day paid vacation guaranteed by law, and tech companies usually offer around 30.
Sick leave is also paid, so means you don't have to worry about how to pay your bills when you're in a zombie-like state.
Of course, high taxes have something to do with the hustle culture being vastly different, but in general, life here is more life than work-oriented.
Let's see if this survives the test of time, but at least this has been my experience during 2010s and the beginning 2020s. When a friend of mine visited me from the US, his comment after seeing all of this was, okay, Europe is never gonna catch up with the US. But does it really have to catch up? Generally speaking, I think it's just different priorities. Not necessarily good or bad, it's just different. Same with comparing Asia to Europe or the US. It's just absolutely different culture, different lifestyle, different priorities.
You know, like you're supposed to have your average 2.3 children, a white picket fence surrounding a split-level house with a dog and a cat, and a station wagon to take the little brats to sports practice? Yes. The good old American dream I'm talking about. None of that here. After years carefully observing Germans in their natural habitat, I created this composite image of what I call a German dream.
Picture this, a spouse and a kid, not necessarily yours by the way, lol, and you're legally married, for tax perks of course. The husband is regularly going on his business trips, and she's going to perfect her dance at the dance classes. But crucially, the marriage is intact. Both have corporate jobs, ideally at one of those big name corporations like Siemens or Bosch or Volkswagen. But if you're a government worker, you hit a jackpot. Job security, good pay, and pension, wow, all the neighbors envy you. But to get there, you might want to consider learning the language, yeah?
Yes, you can get away living your entire life in cities like Berlin without German, but if you want to pay respect to the locals, make it easier on yourself and more affordable too, better speak the language and get to know people. Vitamin B is a German code word
Nobody really uses
for Beziehungen or connections. It's easy to discard it at first, but let me tell you, if you are striving for something better than mediocre, you better start expanding your network. It will be handy anywhere from getting that specialist doctor appointment faster than in 4 months, and I'm not even joking, arranging interior renovations where you want workers to actually show up, finding an apartment to rent instead of staying on a bench, or a good deal on a mortgage for that matter, not getting ripped off at the car mechanic, getting a job, getting rid of your kid to a kindergarten. Man, maybe it's an obvious thing to everyone everywhere and it's kind of a general wisdom, but to me it was such a revelation.
A bit late too. It was one of those little things I was trying to escape from by moving to Germany in the first place.
I wanted the system with clear rules that works so I can follow them and get a piece of cake. Well, you get a piece of cake, but it's not going to be the best one. Don't get me wrong, the system generally works and you will be able to get all those things without connections, but it will cost you way more time, money and your nerves. But hey, at least these connections don't have to feel forced. Kinda. The good thing in Berlin is you get to meet people with all kinds of backgrounds. There are so many subcultures in Berlin, I didn't even know half of them existed. From casual festival goers to hardcore techno lovers, from nerds of all kinds to oh, I'm better than you, shallow silly ducks, from the corporate office rats to anarchists. So maybe it will take you time to find your groove, but at least there is a variety to choose from. Another good thing is that while the rest of Germany, especially outside of big cities, can be quite conservative, Berlin is welcoming and accepting of all kinds of weirdos.
Maybe that's why it felt like home for me.
You know, like New York is known for crazy street people and nobody notices when somebody's screaming, etc. Well, it can be just like that, just with a German touch, meaning sometimes they scream in German here instead.
But in all seriousness, you will be accepted here with all of your quirks and features. And what I mean by that is that they won't care about you.
You can dress up as whatever you want, be whoever you want, and do whatever you want as long as you don't harm anyone. This is kind of like an unspoken social agreement here. Don't worry, there are ghettos for normies here as well. Moving more into rural areas, it gets more conservative, of course.
I even got approached once by a somewhat not so sober lady who felt the urge to let me know that I'm not Jesus. And if I wanted to get chicks around, I should have better cut my hair. I mean, okay, maybe she was right, but normally you wouldn't hear anything like this in Berlin.
Oh, people will judge you, alright? It's just that nobody will tell you, point fingers or beat you to death for that matter, with some exceptions maybe. A lot of people move here escaping from all the dictatorships around the world where they cannot express themselves freely or are simply fleeing from war and violence. Thanks to the open-minded general culture here, people use it as a safe harbor where they can try and live in peace and not be afraid to be themselves. Berlin is known as the queer capital of Europe and is competing for the world title, for example. If you have left-leaning views, especially of a more radical kind, it's a perfect place for you too. Here you can enjoy the benefits of the Western civilization and the welfare state, all the while talking about smashing capitalism, expressing your love to Marxism and all the goodies that come along with it. The right-leaning scene is not viewed as favorably, especially by the media, but the media's strategy of explaining the dangers of radical right views is utterly pathetic and outdated, which, along with downplaying the dangers of radical left and incompetent politicians on many levels in the last decades, led to a seriously concerning rise of that one right-wing party, the party that uses populistic slogans easy to digest and relate to for the general population. That's how they gain popularity. Sounds familiar, huh? As we know, countries like Putin's Russia and PRC under Xi are only happy to add fuel to any existing fire. So don't be surprised to see a growing divide here as well, to the benefit of those who want to see the Western civilization fail.
Whoops, this got political real fast. But don't worry, I'll keep it to absolute minimum. Besides, hey, this is my perspective and I feel like it's absolutely necessary to make at least somewhat complete, no BS picture.
So Berlin being so bunt, and political context meaning diverse, is not a new phenomenon. The city has always attracted the best minds and political activists from the entire spectrum, spiced up with creative people of all kinds. Remember, Berlin is a city of revolutions, and in times where we are in a phase of uncertainty and tectonic political changes on a global scale, if things start escalating, my bet is you will see some street action in Berlin sooner or later. You don't need an excuse to burn down a couple of cars on the street, even in peaceful times after all. This happens not even related to any protest or street violence. Kids do it just for fun from time to time. Some might do it as a revenge, or I can imagine for insurance reasons too. No, it's not as bad as the pictures you see from France every now and then. The protests in the last decade have been vastly peaceful, but the point I'm trying to make is the potential to explode is there, and although I want to believe people here are generally calmer and will be able to figure out what's going on, the reality is when things go out of control, it's hard to bring people to their senses. According to Bard, over the last 40 years, there have been an average of 3.8 terror attacks per year overall in Germany versus 1.6 in Berlin alone. Most of these are done by right, left, and Islamist extremists. The trend is somewhat declining, but what do these numbers mean? Well, essentially they mean you're more likely to get hit by a bus, but good to know this is the world we live in, huh?
So, is Berlin safe? Well, it is. But, I mean, common sense applies, okay? Don't go in the middle of the night somewhere under a bridge, into the darkness, all dressed up in a leather suit, alright?
And oh god, don't get me started on bikes, especially if you plan on owning one in Berlin. Over the years, I got only 2 stolen, which is not bad at all by local accounts. So don't leave your bike outside for long and make sure to lock it. If you hope a local Sherlock Holmes is going to investigate the curious case of your stolen bike, well, sorry to break it to you, but it only happens in fairy tales. And the only kind of fairies you're gonna meet in Berlin are far different from the ones you read about in Peter Pan book.
Welcome to the real world, jackass!
The cycling infrastructure is great though. Not as smooth and seamless as in the Netherlands, some obnoxious ducks would notice, but to be fair, Germany is more than 8 times bigger than the Netherlands, and given its population density, its infrastructure is quite impressive and is getting better every year. Besides, the Netherlands are going underwater soon anyway, so the joke is on them. Let's see what they say when they all turn into mermaids and come swimming to Germany to look at all the beautiful bike paths they won't be able to ride on anyway because they would be, well, mermaids. There are various activist groups and bike lobbyists to keep on building the cycling network and make sure the existing one is getting safer and more convenient. Most of the drivers are aware of you on the roads, and unless you jump under a truck or, like yours truly, get doored, you will deeply enjoy cycling. Some, including myself, even do it in winter, just for the sake of annoying car drivers.
Seriously though, it's safe here. Unless you decide you want to have some jaga and chill action here. Could be worse. You might want to settle down with a lifelong partner. And why that would be dangerous, you might ask? Oh, because the process of looking for a partner might land you in a mental institution, that's all. Meet the dating apps. That's right, we talked about making friends, now let's talk about making... kids? Or whatever that is you're looking for in a relationship, really. Now, the good thing is you have all kinds of people in these apps. The bad thing is you have all kinds of people on those apps.
But listen, you just gotta be honest with yourself first, understand what you really want at whatever stage of your life you are, and make it clear in your profile. And then just roll the dice, put in the work, and you might still end up alone and under a bridge. So why bother? Might as well go to one of those creepy places with dolls and robots.
Sounds like fun. But enough about me, let's talk about food. Everybody likes food, right?
Food quality is generally great here. Every American immigrant will tell you that. I will add that you can find food for any budget, whether it's organic, gluten-free, halal, kosher, vegan, hand-picked, fair trade, salt-free, sugar-free, fat-reduced handmade potato chips, or some sausage made out of what remotely resembles meat, but hey, at least it would be cheap. The point is, in the German social state, you are unlikely to die of starvation. What you are way more likely to die from is the bureaucracy. But we'll discuss this topic in more detail later. The tap water is also drinkable, and while many cities unofficially compete for the status of the cleanest water from the tap, the reality is, well, you can drink it once in a while. In cities like Berlin, doesn't really mean you should. It's really hard water here. And everyone, especially ladies out there, will complain how harsh it is on your skin and hair. And my suspicion is, it's not a blessing for your kidneys either. So using a filter for that tap water is kind of a must, unless you're planning to mine those stones from your kidneys later down the line. The food though is really great in big cities, especially in Berlin. You get to try cuisines from all over the world. Of course, the expats will cry about how, oh, it's not the same, it's not original. To which I have to say 3 things. First, in any country, the same recipe is cooked slightly differently in every family. It's a fact. Deal with it. Second, you can put in some effort and most likely you will find that authentic place representing home food you crave, at least with 85% accuracy. Not good enough? Go back to where you came from. Or better yet, open your own place and do it the way you see it.
And 3, to me as a person coming from a place
Where restaurants used to be of basically two kinds, sushi restaurants and just generic food restaurants. It was mind-blowing to discover everything from African fast food through Middle Eastern couscous dishes, all the way to those Argentinian little sweet things, whatever they are called.
and even mate tea. No, not the German bubbly kind. It's fantastic, really. In Berlin, you can go every week to a new kind of restaurant for a year, and you will not get bored. With some effort, you can even find some traditional German food. You can forget about customer service though, it's literally non-existent.
I had to leave a restaurant on a couple of occasions simply because the waiter didn't bother coming over.
Could be, of course, they despised me, but more likely, the waitress is yet another aspiring artist and has her own head full of all the art projects she's working on, besides the romance drama she's going through, and here you are, showing up expecting them to smile. Get a life. On the other hand, nobody's shoving a tablet into your face asking to select between 20 and 200% tip.
So, is it safe? Well, for the most part, yes.
You don't see gutter oil reports you get from the good old BRC nowadays, for example. But don't be surprised to see toilets completely ruined, as if Russians tried to, liberate them. And that guy, chef, not using gloves while making you a donor.
All this talk about food makes me feel a bit hot. Alright, that's because there is no air conditioning in Germany.
Everyone coming from anywhere really is bitching about it. The thing is, the summer here is temperate. There might be 4 or 5 weeks of really hot days, tops, and for the most of the cases, a simple fan works. I get to like this approach over the years because let's talk about the unspoken downside of air conditioning, the window wars. People crank up the AC and seal off their windows, leaving you gasping for a breath of fresh air. Not to mention the sad reality of most AC filters, which haven't seen a cleaning since Bismarck was in power. So it's healthier for you, STFU. And here's a little secret for you. Germany is a bit more on the cloudy side.
When that rare golden orb makes an appearance, you'll witness a phenomenon. People emerge from their dwellings like bears waking up from hibernation, flocking onto any patch of grass, even if it's modest 5 degrees Celsius outside.
So guess what is another thing almost every expat is bitching about?
The weather. Granted, it's the fall season, the beautiful autumn, nice and yellow and everything. But if you're used to summers when it's all sunny and warm outside, you might be disappointed. Also, summer kind of lasts here from June to September, maybe, if you're lucky. But the winter season is pretty much starting in October and lasts all the way through April, sometimes May. Dark, cold, wet winter. No snow. It's gonna suck, man. Unless you may be somewhere in the mountains, but that's pretty much what you have to deal with.
Another reason for air conditioning situation is that there are a lot of rules and regulations in Germany. Some of them saying you're not allowed to ruin a facade of an old building with that ugly piece of plastic crap air conditioning usually is. Don't worry, the scary rules you hear, like people wait for the green light, are not that bad in practice, at least not in Berlin. Of course, it's not a jaywalking mayhem I've experienced when I was in London, but common sense applies. I wrote a thread on Threads, if that's still a thing, exactly on this topic.
Coming back to air conditioning free walls,
That's one of the things I greatly enjoy in Germany, architecture. It's different from one federal land to another. I grew up basically surrounded by what's left of the great Prussian architecture, don't confuse with Russian. Berlin reminds me a bit of City 17, where old blends with new and even somewhat futuristic. Frankly, I love this blend. Of course, some parts are uglier than others, but overall it's always interesting to explore the city. You will notice that quadratisch praktisch gut applies here more than in the aforementioned Netherlands, where they just seem to show off with almost every building they create. Rich bastards. What else except old buildings and old farts you'll see a lot of in Germany? Old cars. That's right, old American, German and other European cars, of course, some from the GDR and even good old USSR. They love their old timers, as they call them, and lucky car owners enjoy lower taxes than those.
Talking about cars, slowly sliding into the transportation category, I guess. You don't need one in any major city, if you live centrally, that is.
Especially in cities with countless car sharing options. But even in smaller towns, public transport is usually really good, clean and well thought through. Of course, a lot of people keep complaining how Deutsche Bahn, the company that operates the railways, is shit and how their train was 2 minutes late. But the reality is, given the extensive network, it's impressive it works well most of the time. Of course, I could mention that one time I had an itinerary with multiple connections and the very first of them failed because the driver did not show up to work. Oh,
I guess I just did. Seriously though, public transit just works. Google Maps will tell you when the train is coming, etc. The only thing missing from Google Maps is maybe the GPS tracking of specific trams and buses in real time. Even my mom says it's hard to get lost here because there are signs, maps, and information screens everywhere. And airports, well, they're just regular airports with good connections because A, Germany's geographical location, and B, there are a couple of huge international hubs like Frankfurt Airport with long distance connections. My favorite airport was unfortunately closed a few years ago. I liked it because it was like a bus stop. You go in, get on a plane, and leave. Simple and efficient, and it was in the city. The modern airports usually suck because it takes 2 hours to get there, and after going through always understaffed security, you always have to suffer going through what I call a gas chamber. You know, that section in the airport they sell all the crap in nobody really needs, with all that cologne and I don't know what else, with that horrendous stench.
And if you're buying any of that crap, you are complicit in the crimes against humanity.
Anyway, the further you go away from the cities, the more you will feel the need for a car. In some villages, it's even a must. The one I stayed in, you could get away with a bicycle for your daily shopping, GP, gym, and so on, but the options are really limited. Driving in the countryside is quite enjoyable though, unlike in the city. Of course, it's still very civilized in cities compared to some wild countries out there. I personally observed a situation at a four-way intersection where cars approached from 3 sides and everyone was so uber polite they couldn't decide who should go first.
Oh, after you, man. Oh, no, you first. Oh no, after you, madam.
Oh, Jesus. Still better like this than the absolute chaos you see in some countries.
The roads are mostly safe and well maintained. It always amuses me to hear morons to talk about construction in cities. I mean, what do you want? You need maintenance to get your shit running.
Besides, who pays for that sweet infrastructure? That's right, your taxes. So you better enjoy seeing them go to something you can benefit from. Talking about benefits,
Let's address the elephant in the room.
it's generally known that taxes are quite high in Germany, but you get what you pay for, right? The water is clean, the trains are on time, and the internet is fast, and the roads are clean and smooth, right? Well, kinda. It's definitely a pleasant stroll on most of the streets. Everything genuinely looks really nice and beautiful in a lot of places, but you look a bit under the surface and you'll find a lot of points for frustration. But let's not jump ahead of ourselves. We'll talk about bureaucracy, corruption, and German efficiency a bit down the line. And now, let's see how the tax system works.
First off, it's worth mentioning that if you have a so-called mini job where you get 520 euros per month, you pay no taxes on it, but health insurance is not covered. If you register within an employment office, they will cover it for you, but that's a separate big topic in itself. And so let's say you have a 60-year gross salary, which is not bad by German standards. 60k is an okay pay for a few years worth of experience in tech. A taxi driver, for comparison, gets around 25k, but this is very approximate and without tip. Maybe 28k is more like it. The same goes for drinks, food delivery drivers. For contrast, a cop with a bachelor's degree be earning something around 50k. It varies also a little on the federal land and a bunch of other factors. A doctor, like a real one, the one that makes surgeries and stuff, can earn something around 80k, maybe a 90. If there is more interest on the topic in the comments, I might make a separate video giving you an overview of who makes what approximately in Germany. So coming back to our 60k.
60k is what you negotiate about. To your employer, you will actually cost about 20% more. So with a gross salary of 60k, you cost your employer slightly more than 70k, meaning they pay more taxes even before you see it anywhere on your check. After all the taxes and mandatory contributions, you will have around 37k left. This would be the net amount that you get in your bank. Don't forget about that value-added tax you pay for the most of the stuff you buy. Wink wink. But don't worry about it. Everyone is in the same system. Everyone is paying it. So this is just how it works. And you get all the benefits of the social state. For example, health insurance with minimal dental coverage is already covered in this setup I just described. And for the medicine, you have to pay yourself, unless it's absolutely necessary. You know, that stuff that you will absolutely need or you will die. So when you do die, they say that they actually try to help.
You can extend healthcare coverage with a private health insurance instead of a compulsory one, but it's a huge topic on its own and I wanted to give more of an overview here than an in-depth breakdown. But to sum it up, it's great to have most people insured and not having to sell your liver to get your leg patched up. Good luck getting a specialist appointment with that compulsory insurance though.
A psychological therapist or a dermatologist, for example, might have waiting times of 6 months easily. With private insurance, you will get to see a professional much faster. And more times than not, they will also be actually, well, professional. A couple of examples for you. With my compulsory insurance, when I got a meniscus problem in my knee, a minor problem but still needed operation, they just told me to come to the hospital myself while walking for me was really painful, which I somehow still managed to do, just to wait in line for a good 5 hours before getting an x-ray and to see a doc for literally 2 minutes who just said, go home, it's gonna be fine, drink some tea, and if it's still not fine in a couple of days, come back again. Needless to say, all the walking didn't really help my knee in the slightest. In fact, it's gotten much worse, but you can consider me lucky, because someone I know told me even a better story about his adventures in German hospitals. When he came to a hospital suffering from pain in his guts, they just gave the standard German doctor advice: go home and drink some tea, which he promptly did, just to call an ambulance a few hours later to save him at the last minute from a bursting appendix. And mind you, he's a German for what it's worth. And how about my mom, who was in shock and disbelief after having gone from a GP to an eye doctor to a skin doctor to a hospital and still haven't gotten any help for a quite significant rash and swelling all around the eyes. And they didn't even prescribe tea. In the end, she had to go back to the GP and beg for at least some kind of prescription, which finally worked. A little advice here: always exaggerate with any doctors or they won't give a flying duck. And get to know people and maintain good relationships with them. A nice gesture in the form of a fruit bowl goes a long way. In Ukraine, I consider this corruption and never really understood it. But having experienced how things work here, I don't know what to think about this anymore. I mean, you do want to thank people if they genuinely helped you, right?
Oh, got a bit carried away here. But don't worry, taxes don't end with an income tax. So we also got property tax, tax on your car and your dog. Yes, you're getting taxed for owning a dog. The hated public broadcast tax, which technically is not a tax, but it kind of is in practice. The capital gain tax, the dividend income tax, the interest income tax, the rental income tax, or what about sex tax? Yeah, because the oldest profession in the world is legal in Germany. Of course you have to pay tax on that as well.
But let's go back a little, because yeah, you heard that right, you pay taxes on dogs, which I think settles the debate on the topic who's better, cats or dogs. But your expenses only start off with taxes, as evidenced by the fact that even getting an animal from a local shelter will cost you a symbolic, but still a fee. It's not like in Ukraine, where when your cat dies, you just go on the street and pick yourself another one. No, in fact, there are no stray cats or dogs here at all for that matter. You are more likely to see a fox or a rabbit in the city than a cat. And since you're already paying a tax on your dog, you might consider buying health insurance for your furry buddy. No, it's not mandatory, but it might be worth it, especially if it gets in trouble a lot. And if it gets in trouble in terms of destroying somebody's property, consider a dog liability insurance on top of that.
And whoops, it looks like we stepped into the land of insurances. Or Germany, as I like to call it. Except for the aforementioned ones, you can also consider
I didn't expect that.
the only one, except for the mandatory health insurance, you will need is a liability insurance. It's not mandatory, but a lot, and I mean 94% of the population have it. And if you don't, they will look at you like you have an IQ lower than, well, them.
Finally, you paid all your taxes and insured the hell out of your butt. And that got you hungry.
A square meal would set you back around 10 euros. Some fast food like a doner or shawarma would be around 6 euros. A meal at a somewhat nice restaurant with a possible drink will add up to 20 euros per person, and beyond of course. Cooking yourself always saves you money and you know what you put inside. Well, kind of. You can survive on a couple of €100 a month doing that. For something like 500, you'd be eating pretty decently and healthy, organic and all that. After you have eaten, you want to go home and take a nap. Oh wait, you need to find a place to rent first.
Good luck with that.
Seriously, it took me almost a year to find my last apartment in Berlin, and it was still far from perfect. As mentioned before, you better know people, and it's still gonna cost you a lot of effort. As for money, don't expect to spend less than 1,200 euros a month on an apartment without furniture. Unless it's a 25 square meter shithole that looks like a KGB Stasi dungeon with no windows and no working heating. That price that I mentioned would be what Germans call warm. No, it doesn't mean the apartment is gonna be warm, as opposed to cold. It simply means the money on top of the rent that goes directly to your landlord Includes also additional unavoidable costs like Grundsteuer, insurances, services of the elevator, lighting and cleaning services in the common areas of the building and garden, base cost for the cold water and sewage, trash management, and most of the time also heating. Because it's hard to find an apartment and because of the prices, a lot of not necessarily younger people live in WGs, a local term for shared apartments. When I moved to Berlin, I was lucky to find one in just 3 days, and it cost me around 400 euros a month, all included. Looking back, I got really lucky. Nowadays, don't expect to find anything under 600 euros and prepare to look for a month. It's not as bad as what you hear from New York City or those tiny Japanese apartments, but it's not a comfy situation either. Don't look for apartments on Craigslist. Nobody's using it here except scammers. Your go-to places are Immobilien Scout 24, WG Gesucht, Facebook groups, and maybe Kleinanzeigen. Less popular towns might have a better situation, but Berlin currently sucks in this matter, especially if you're young and single. You'd be competing not just with high earners, but also with couples and people with more German names than yours, so good luck, dude. Also anecdotal, but still, one duck didn't want to rent out an apartment to me because my income was too high for his taste, and he thought that I should have rented his other, more expensive apartment. He knows my personal situation better than myself, of course. That gives him the right to decide how much money I should spend on an apartment, what can I say. If you've decided you want to settle down and buy your own place instead, it's a huge topic, of course, but maybe you'll find something starting from 200k. Unless, again, it's somewhere so remote, not even Starlink is gonna help you connect to the rest of the world, or there is something else absolutely wrong with it. The prices have risen significantly, and I mean like doubled in some cases in the last 10-15 years, so I'm not sure if it's worth it at this point anymore. Like I mentioned, in the city you don't need a car, and I didn't have an experience buying a car personally, but if you don't want to get out to countless lakes or to the sea for a weekend, there are car sharing options. I recommend registering with a couple of the biggest ones to have options to choose from. If you need the car for longer than a few hours or minutes, booking ahead from a regular big famous car rental company is always a safe and cheaper bet. What I really like though is the option to rent a car from a private person. You can get a Tesla for 90 euros a day, for example, or something exotic sometimes, which is pretty sweet. What I liked even better was trying out van life without owning a van. If you book ahead and are not too picky, you can get yourself a van for under 100 euros a night and go traveling around Germany and even Europe. I did it myself a couple of times, and those were some of the best days and moments of my life, really. Might make a report on it one day. Too bad I didn't film much. Click on the affiliate link in the description to get 30 euros added to your balance and van away without the burden of actually owning a van. If sleeping in a van is too wild of an idea for you, a hotel price of 100 euros a night in tourist hotspots is quite normal. Sometimes it's the minimum, really. So if you're looking for a more affordable stay, you might want to check out rooms on Airbnb, hostels, rooms on WG Gesucht, and local Facebook groups. Now, having the living space sorted so you don't have to sleep on a bench after paying all the taxes and insurances, it's time to get rid of your larvae so you can actually enjoy life a little. Luckily for you, kitas, daycare, kindergartens, school, and higher education are essentially free in Germany, at least compared to the US system.
You still need to pay for food, extracurricular activities and such. Damn, who wrote the script?
But it's still great to know you won't be skinned for just trying to educate yourself or attempting to get your little brat a better life. Students also get some discounts like reduced public transportation tickets, museum allowance, etc. Don't you worry, you won't get an easy pass. You will still have to fight bureaucracy and deal with human factor just the same. Scarcity of good places under the sun takes its toll, so don't think it's a paradise.
Before we wrap this up, a dishonorable mention of German bureaucracy, my favorite topic of them all.
I can bitch about it forever, and funnily enough, until relatively recently, I didn't think it was a problem at all. That is, until I had almost lost my sanity in the recent years, and let me tell you why. Let's start with good things. Generally, the system works. There are laws and rules, which are relatively easy to find on the internet, along with an algorithm for your actions in case you need something from the government. You don't need to bribe anyone to get your basic services, and it's just amazing. Many people take it for granted, but it's kind of magical how people cooperate to keep the 80 million people economy running. From a user perspective, in most cases you book an appointment online.
If you can find it, that is. Hello, Bürgeramt appointment memes.
You get to the office, maybe you'll have to wait a little, but the point is, you'll get what you need provided you have collected all the documents. The credit score system, referred to as SCHUFA, is there to ensure you're not dealing with frauds if you want to rent out an apartment, for example. Sounds great. Why do I need to pay for it if any new landlord requires it when you're looking for an apartment?
I don't know.
So, like I said, the system works, but the problem is probably with any bureaucracy is there is little incentive to improve things. So, from what I can see from the outside, there is either a complete lack of system in place that works on streamlining processes, or it's not working really well. Or possibly people in the system are not even motivated to improve the situation too much, because who knows, maybe some jobs won't be needed anymore because of the improvements, and nobody wants to lose their job. Another example, Germans love to talk about protecting environment and recycling, stressing on the talk here. But when the rubber hits the road, they send tons of mail around. Yes, the snail mail, as they call it.
Oh, they just love it.
I had a nice conversation with the bank once where I would send them an email and they would reply to me a few days later via mail.
What?
Why? Not even once. We corresponded like this for a while.
Well, at least they responded, wasting humongous amounts of paper in the process.
I was even asked once with a genuine curiosity, how come I don't have a printer at home?
Like, how do I even survive, lol?
But what was driving me almost literally insane for years was when I applied for citizenship, I would not get a response from several months to half a year, sometimes longer. And when I did get a response, they wouldn't let me know what they actually expected from me, besides the official requirements I already knew, until a year later and countless follow-ups from my side. Digitalization has been a buzzword for at least a decade in Germany, and oh my god, how slowly it's moving. At least you can send emails to most government offices nowadays instead of mailing them in, but it really started changing during all the lockdowns. They will still require you to send some papers in or reply via mail, but hey, the progress is there and could be worse. Pigeon or all post maybe. The next favorite thing is probably cash. Small business owners love cash because authorities can't track all of it, hence no need to pay a tax on all of your turnover. Some justify it with privacy, but come on, do you really need to pay with coins on the supermarket? Germans love their coins. They even build special slots for those coins in their cars. You will need those round relics of the Roman Empire almost everywhere. From unlocking a shopping cart at the supermarket and paying for parking, to buying tickets in trams and that fluffy thing at a local flea market. Thank God a year or two ago they finally started installing somewhat modern pay and display machines. Yes, it's 2020s we're talking about. The internet is slow in a lot of places because on the one hand, you want the streets to look clean and nice, so all the infrastructure is hidden under the pavement. On the other hand, it means more bureaucracy, as you need to get a bunch of permissions to dig up all the cables and replace them with the new ones to get your internet speed above 15 megabits per second. And that's Berlin. It's progressed a lot in 10 years, but still I was shocked coming to one of supposedly the most developed countries in the world to find the state of things like this. In third world countries, they don't care. They will throw the cable over the building walls, then bam, you get your 1000 megabit per second in no time. Looks ugly though, so pick your battles. Corruption, as I said, is not so apparent, but make no mistake, it's there. To get an apartment in places like Berlin, people are getting desperate. For some, it makes sense to pay 1,000–2,000 euros, maybe more, just to get that apartment in a sweet spot, instead of waiting for years. For buying properties, I can imagine the numbers are much higher. This is a rare example though. Most of the corruption happens in the upper echelons. Berlin Airport is a huge example, where contracting companies were milking the budget money for years with little to no repercussions. Another huge scandal is CumEx, and you can look it up yourself. It's just the tip of the iceberg. We're talking billions of euros a year, every year. It happens all the time on a smaller scale, with smaller federal and local projects. It's just that nobody gives a damn. Don't even get me started on the Nord Streams and bringing the country into dependencies on the Russian gas and markets, or spreading Russian disinformation and twisted reality via the very same public broadcast channels citizens are obliged to pay this TV tax for. Another more tangible example of German efficiency, when you enjoy seeing where your tax money goes, is when you see a guy trying to make graffiti, or rather leave one of those ugly tags nobody needs. And how many police cars do you think arrive at the scenes to detain the unarmed guy?
3? 4? What about 7?
That's right, that's 7 police vehicles with a couple of officers each. Why?
I don't know.
But when your bike gets stolen from your cellar with breaking and entering, which is a criminal offense by the way, they don't even show up at your place to ask the witnesses, sending a letter in a couple of months that, oh, the case is closed, we couldn't do anything.
enough about all of that negativity, or what I call my reality. I think I might need a donor just to recover from thinking about all of that stuff.
So, has my impression changed over the 10 years of living in Germany? It has most definitely evolved along with me. Berlin did change a lot. Entire neighborhoods arose, and not somewhere on the outskirts, but in the city center. A lot of places got heavily gentrified, empty post-war and post-Berlin Wall spaces between buildings keep disappearing. 2 airports got closed, greatly improving air quality, especially in Tegel and Wedding areas. The city has gone through 2 huge waves of refugees, Syria and Ukraine. The city population has crossed the pre-war mark for the first time and keeps on growing. When I arrived, the craziest post-Berlin Wall days were just about gone, but I still enjoyed exploring the old abandoned buildings, old GDR and West Berlin vibes, and even experiencing some of the craziest parties in my life. I met a lot of smart, creative and really interesting people, with some of whom I'm still in touch to this day, and I'm grateful for all the experiences, good and bad, that let me evolve and understand myself better. History is still very much in your face at every corner in Berlin. I still can't believe I used to live just a few blocks away from the place where one of my all-time favorite movies, Das Kabinett des Dr. Caligari, was shot.
But don't worry, there are enough buildings and streets with rich history for everyone. The people living here have interesting lives, so if you're a curious person, you will definitely not get bored here.
It definitely did get more expensive, and over time the city almost lost that poor but sexy vibe. So if you're looking for that, Leipzig or other smaller places might be a better alternative. Of course, I just scratched the surface with this video, and there is so much more to unpack and so many stories to tell. So if you're down to hearing some of them, with my no bullshit approach, drop a comment on what topic I should expand.
I feel like I grew up in Berlin, spent my 20s really, and despite all the things I half-jokingly hate about the place, it's the only spot where I feel kind of like home, and it will always have a special place in my heart. So I'm not saying sayonara just yet. I hope it's more of auf Wiedersehen, meaning until we meet again. This video will be going live after I will have already left Germany. I've gotten myself this little passport over here, and it allows me to travel to most of the countries in the world, and I'm finally getting myself out there on this path. So more interesting stuff to come. Stay awesome and don't stop exploring. Till the next time.
Zurückbleiben bitte.